So I'm just going to go ahead and prematurely blow my load here in this video and just say, George Takei, go fuck yourself, asshole. Okay, sit on it and spin. You'd like that too much, so we'll just retract that last part there. But anyway, for those of you that don't know who George Takei is, this is Sulu from Star Trek. Alright, I grew up loving Star Trek. I still love Star Trek. I grew up loving Sulu. I thought he was a cool character, especially in the movies when you got to do a little bit more than just be a red shirt for all intents and purposes that somehow lived through everything back in the original series. I loved Sulu. And then we found out here in the last 5 to 10 years, he came out as a liberal. And it's bad, it's horrible. It's about the worst thing you can do to your family and your loved ones, but he did, and he feels very open about talking about it all the time and all his libtarded ideologies, and it's just, it's insufferable, and it's so hard because, you know, he's a character that you love growing up, and then he turns into that, and you realize he was probably that all along, and you just feel like you need to take a shower. Anyway, for those of you that don't know, he's Japanese American, as I'm sure he would call himself. I just call him American, but you know, you always got to throw in that little cultural reference in there. And he's old enough to have been locked up in the great Democrat f.d.r.'s evil internment camps back during World War II. Yes, you know, Hitler had his concentration camps and f.d.r. had his. Yay! Nazis and Democrats. A lot in common there. That's a whole other video. Anyway, we'll move on. So, for 4 years of George Takei's life, he was locked up in a prison with his family, forcibly, taken away from everything he knew, everything he had grown up with, and was held there. Again, 4 years throughout the war. And then after the war was over, released, patted on the head, sent off out into the wild. No home, no car, no belongings, no land, no job, no nothing. His family had everything stripped away from them and had to start over completely 100% from scratch, as did so many tens of thousands of Americans after this. It was a horrible, horrible period in the history of our country. Probably not the worst, but close. We did it. I say we. The Democrats did it. But again, I digress. Let's not get onto that little point. It's a whole other video. But hopefully it's something that will never, ever, ever happen again. But see, here's the problem I have with George Takei. Takei, either way, it doesn't matter. You see, recently he was on some show, I don't know, politically incorrect maybe, something on MSNBC, CNN, I don't know, I don't really care, it doesn't really matter, it was a libtard-leaning show, and they were talking about what's going on the border with locking up children. Never mind the fact that that's not true, that's not what's happening. I live in Brownsville, Texas, I know people who work at that children's center. They have beds and food and clothing and games and TV and all this kind of stuff, and 80% of them are unaccompanied minors. 80% of the kids coming across our border, they don't have families. They're just sitting here by their families, okay? What are we supposed to do with them, all right? We can feed them and clothe them and house them until we can find a real home for them, like is what we're doing, or we can just leave them out on the streets. We choose to actually take care of them. Then there's the other 20% that do, in fact, get separated from their parents who came here illegally and knew that they were going to be separated from their kids while we, as the United States, assessed whether or not we would give them asylum. And then, regardless, once we've determined that, they are reunited with their children once again, whether it's to stay here with asylum or to go back to wherever it is that they came from. It's temporary. We temporarily take better care of their kids than they do. And again, that's only 20% of the cases. But anyway, back to George Takei. So he was recently talking about this, and George Takei came out when asked about the situation on the border and said, you know what's going on here, it's not as bad as the internment camps from f.d.r. back during World War II. No, it's not that bad. It's worse. It's so much worse. This is Hitler, Nazi style stuff going on, and it's horrible. It's horrible. This is where our country's coming to. It's horrible. Really? Are you fucking kidding me? These kids are not locked up. They're given food and clothing and games and blah, 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 everything I just said. And most of them aren't being separated for anybody. They're showing up here for all intents and purposes as orphans. What, do we leave them on the street? We don't do that. We're not that cruel. Now look, I don't like the idea of anybody being separated from their parents, but it happens all the time. If I go out and break a law, I'm separated from my children. That's what's happening here. At least these people aren't staying locked up. They're just keeping them in a detention center until they assess whether or not they grant them asylum, while the kids stay in the children's center because we don't lock kids up with their parents. It's absolutely ridiculous to compare this to f.d.r.'s internment camps, because it's not the same thing at all. It insults you and your family and everybody else who lost everything that they had built. Some of these people had been here for 2, maybe 3 generations, had everything taken away from them. They were Americans. They had rights granted to them by the Constitution of the United States, rights that we respect in this country. And you do a disservice to everybody who suffered through that when you compare what's going on the border with Children's Center, where we take care of children better than their parents can, to what you went through. It's pathetic. It's sad. It's pushing a narrative, outright lies. That's what it is. So there you go, Sulu. Thanks for fucking up my childhood, showing what kind of libtard you really are. And I guess I might as well say it again, George Takei, go fuck yourself.